This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love. That you would take my place. That you would bear my cross. You would lay down your life. That I would be set free. Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. All that you've done for me.
Okay, shall we get started? Obviously, we're not, no one else is coming. All right. All right, so tonight we're going to be going through a couple of quick things. We're going to be finishing up that little part on apologetics as we start, and then we're going to jump right into 1 Corinthians chapter 3. And remember, these guys are the Christians, you guys are the atheists, and we're going to kind of walk through not only some of the arguments, but how to find those arguments. Because sometimes it's not, you might read through it and go, I don't know what an atheist would have an objection here. So we're going to start looking at some of these things. And hopefully, what we're going to be talking about in terms of worldview and the apologetic side, you're going to see come out of that conversation. Okay, so last week we left off on the conversation of origins, or where did I come from, right? And we talked basically about the idea that there are only two options. You're either here through intent, or you are here through an accident. Okay, random chance processes. And I mentioned to you that is the most important answer to all four questions. That's the foundation of a person's worldview, is going to come back to that question. Typically they don't even know it. So when you're thinking about this, and you'll see this play out in the rest of it, the answer to question number one, accident or intent, is going to determine your answers for the other three questions. So when you start talking about the question of meaning, does my life have purpose? Can an accident have purpose? No. An accident is just something that happened. It's a result of chance circumstances. It's a result of whatever happens to be happening at the time, creating whatever the incident is that we would call an accident. It cannot have purpose. It cannot have meaning. It cannot even have desire. Without special intent in our creation, you are nothing more than a series of biochemical reactions. So, when people say, well, I'm not responsible, I was born that way, I couldn't help myself, they're leaning back on this idea that we are not responsible for our actions because we are nothing more than biochemical reactions. So, that's just a lame excuse for just about anything. But to an atheist, it makes perfect sense. Now, when you're talking to someone about the idea of meaning, it's naturally going to roll into the question of morality and standards. Can you have meaning? Can you have purpose without a set of standards guiding that purpose? No. Because your meaning will change based on the circumstances. Okay? So, to give you an idea, if my goal is to poison as many people as possible, okay, because I have no moral standards, and I'm inside a country where I cannot get my hands on any form of poison, well, I just changed my purpose. So now I just want to make as many people sick as I possibly can. Do you see what I mean? My morality plays into my meaning, but because I'm just a victim of circumstance. I have to hurt people. I just have to hurt. It's just the way I was born this way. I don't have control over my actions. See how easy it is for me to justify this? And you can't tell me I'm wrong because you're nothing more than a set of biochemical reactions. You're nothing more than complicated pond scum. So how dare you force your morality on me? Because everyone knows morality is subjective. That's the term you want to watch, you want to listen for, subjective morality.
That's when you slap them, right?
Yes, because if you're not, it's Tourette's. I just really, I can say that because I actually was diagnosed with that at one point in time. We're pretty sure that's not what it is, so I can't lean on that, but it just comes in handy, If I ever swear from the pulpit, I'm just going to blame it on that, It's just, anyway, so, yeah. Okay, so and then you can quickly drop down to destiny. What happens when I die? Well, if there is no purpose to your beginning, and so therefore you cannot have really a purpose in your life other than what you predetermined for yourself, and there's no sense of morality, what happens when you die? Nothing. You go back to whatever the dark abyss that you came from is. Or as some people would say, your energy returns to the energy of the universe. Blah.
Back to Ponscom.
Yeah.
Stardust.
Just back to Ponscom. Yeah, exactly. Or Stardust. Oh, I hate that argument. Oh, we're just Stardust. Yeah, you're spacey, all right.
Burning gas.
Yeah, really. So now let's go the other way around. We are the product of special intent. Okay? Now, what about meaning? Well, of course our life has meaning. Have you guys ever created something for absolutely no reason? Ladies, have any of you gone to the hospital complaining of a stomachache and been like, oh, baby, that was weird? Not talking about unplanned. I'm just talking about, like, didn't even know, This is like, thought I had indigestion for the last couple of months, Of course, anything created, because creation is a creative process. You put thought and meaning and intent behind it. Of course we have a purpose. But our purpose is attached to our origin. Our purpose cannot be arbitrary. Purpose and meaning cannot in any way, shape, or form be arbitrary. It goes back to your dad. Why? Because. Now, how many of you have used that on your kids? Because you don't have an answer, right? Yeah. No, well, that's just the way it is. Because. Well, we're not because. We have a purpose. Our purpose is tied up into our origin. God created us for fellowship, to be with him. So our meaning is wrapped up in that. Anything outside of that violates the foundation of our purpose. So when we're selfish, self-centered, egotistical, not humble, we are violating our foundational purpose, which is to be in fellowship with God, because that was the purpose of our creation. Well, if God made us and he has a purpose for our life, then he also has a set of standards by which we will be judged, because he has told us that there will be a set of standards by which we are judged. So the question, is morality subjective or is morality absolute? Becomes a very easy question to answer. Morality is absolute. An atheist cannot give that answer to the question of morality. These are easy ways of trapping people in their own thinking. If you talk to an atheist or an agnostic or someone who doesn't want to believe in God and you ask them, is morality absolute? And they say, well, some things are. Okay, stop. Well, everyone knows murder is wrong. Okay, hold on. If murder is a moral construct that is going to be in all nature, because if you believe in the evolutionary process, then our biochemical responses and the way our mind thinks has to be consistent throughout nature. Then you would have to believe that a cheetah that chases down a gazelle and eats it is violating a moral law. And if you say, well, that's fine, then you also have to agree that if I chase someone down and kill them and eat them, then there's nothing wrong with that, because obviously I'm the more fit in that survival situation. You see how quickly that becomes completely ridiculous? But that's the process that we're dealing with here. You cannot claim to have a moral authority unless there's a moral authority. And you cannot be the moral authority, because that's just self-imposed standards. Either morality is outside of us and will judge us, or there's no such thing as morality other than what society agrees on as a whole. And that goes back to as long as you don't get caught. You understand what I mean? So as Christians, it's very hard for us to say, I know a lot of the local troopers and they won't pull me over. When I'm flying down the road at 85, 90 miles an hour. Because we already know and we've agreed that there is a moral authority by which we will be judged, and that moral authority has stated in his manual, obey the law of the land. Go! It's just getting ugly now, right? It's like, hey, wait a minute, don't mess with my car. Yeah. And our answer to question number 4 also becomes very obvious. What happens when we die? Well, our authority tells us it is appointed to all men once to die and then be judged. So what happens in our death? We're held accountable for our ability to live up to the moral law of God, our ability to align ourselves with the meaning of God, which comes from our origin. You see how neatly tied together? You can't get away from these things. And when an atheist begins to object to what we're going to be looking at, what we call the Word of God, their objections are going to fall in here somewhere. Every time their objections will fall in here. And essentially, once you figure out where they're landing, you take it from there. So if someone says, you can't oppose that Christian morality on me. Okay, so what morality do you want me to impose on you? Well, just the law of the land. Okay, so can the law of the land change? Well, of course it can. Okay, so if enough people vote that rape is okay, is rape now okay? Well, that's just stupid. Well, no, hold on, because there have been societies throughout history where rape was okay. Well, no, of course rape's not okay. How do you know rape's not okay? How do you know murder's not okay? Why does everyone in the world know that theft is not okay? Because the Word of God tells us that He has written His law on the hearts of all men. We know because it has been programmed in us, because we are made in the likeness and the image of God. And we know instinctually that there is a moral authority outside of us. What they don't want to admit is that there is, because once you admit it, now you are bound to it. You see what I mean? Nobody likes to put themselves under somebody else's authority, except Christians. Or I would say religious people in general, but we're just going to go with Christians because we're the ones that are right. So those are the questions that make up someone's worldview. Now, when we're dealing with the apologetic side, one of the things that you want to get yourself familiar with is logic. Okay? Not from a Star Trek standpoint, but at the same time, it works. Okay? Logic is not some snooty, over-the-top, idiotic term. Logic is actually something we all use every day. In most of our situations, we usually just don't know it. Logic is the process dealing with the principles of validity, inference, and demonstration. Okay? The processes dealing with the principles of validity. Who can tell me what I mean? What validity? What does it mean to be valid?
To be true, to be real.
Okay? So an invalid argument would be one that just can't be true, right? How many of you had invalid arguments with your kids? Because their reasoning is flawed. Their logic is flawed. I want that toy. Why? Because they have it. Invalid.
That's no reason.
Right. Why do you need 10 of those? Because I want them. Invalid. It is not a proper chain of thought. So when you're talking about an argument being valid, it has to have balance on both sides. So the chain of reasoning has to work as you're going through it. And we'll get into more of this as we continue. Yeah.
Confirmed, validated, it was confirmed to be true.
Yeah. For example, like we don't go to the moon anymore because the aliens told us not to come back. Okay. Well, now there's two propositions in there, isn't there? One, we don't go to the moon anymore. I'm right there. Second proposition has an issue. So my second proposition is because the aliens didn't told us not to come back. Valid or invalid? Completely. Even though one side of it is totally true. Here's you tell me if this is valid or invalid. We meet inside because it is cold outside.
Yeah, it's valid.
Valid. My two propositions are correct, right?
Mm-hmm.
We meet inside. It's cold outside. So the reasoning is we meet inside because it's cold outside, and we don't want to be cold. Turn that into an invalid argument.
Put your coats on, we'll meet outside.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe inside is warm outside.
What's that?
What happens when it's warm outside too?
Well, an invalid. To invalidate that argument, you got to take one of the premises and make it not valid.
There's zombies outside.
There you go. We meet inside because there are frozen zombies outside that look like snowmen. What's that?
My mind doesn't go there.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I know. Yeah, so and even though part of that premise might have been correct, it's still an invalid argument. It doesn't. You can't get there based on what you're presenting. You know. So inference, the processes of inference. What does it mean to infer?
To draw a conclusion from something else.
Okay, so what is an invalid inference?
We meet inside because I had pizza for dinner.
There you go. Both of those, I'm guessing you had pizza for dinner.
I did.
Yeah. So both sides of that are true. Premise 1 is true. We meet inside. Premise 2 is true. He had pizza for dinner. The conclusion is really ridiculous. You know, so that means we got to call Abel and ask him whether or not he ate inside or outside to determine whether or not we're going to meet in here or outside. You know, the idea that you draw off of that doesn't make any sense. You know, I'm scared to go to bed because there's monsters under my bed. No, he's inferring that there's monsters under the bed, and we know that that's not true. So it becomes the logic in there is flawed. So demonstration, what does it mean, demonstration? Don't think too hard.
To show.
What's that?
To show.
Mm-hmm. You are drinking hot tea. Okay? The logic behind that is I can see the cup, I see the tea bag, and very few people are going to steep tea in cold water. My chain of reasoning has deduced that that is a hot cup of tea.
It's good.
Okay? All right? And I can demonstrate it because there it is. All right? So when we're talking about logic, we're talking about the process of reasoning, the chain of reasoning. Can you go from A to B to C? Can you get there? Okay? In our biblical studies, this becomes very important, not just from an apologetic standpoint, but when we're talking about the Word of God, sometimes we draw a conclusion on a verse that if you actually take that verse in the greater context, you can't get there. So our chain of reasoning has to follow. You have to be able to work both backwards and forwards, and it has to balance on both sides of the equation. Okay? So we're talking about the chain of reasoning. Now, when we're talking about refuting logic, we're talking about logical fallacies, or a break in the chain of reasoning. Okay? Now, typically, when you're dealing with someone, honestly, when you're dealing with an atheist, a lot of times, what you're going to run into are logical fallacies. Some of the arguments are going to look like this. This one's called an ad hominem. A-D-H-O-M-I-N-E-M. An ad hominem attack is when you make it personal. You Christians always. That's an ad hominem attack. It's a logical fallacy because what they're saying immediately is all Christians are like this across the board. There are no exceptions. That's an easy one to refute. Excuse me, have you met all Christians? Well, no. Well, how can you say all Christians? You know, I mean, I might as well just say that all tall people really are just stupid because I met a tall person who was stupid once. It's a logical fallacy. So you want to be able to spot and recognize those fallacies so you can deal directly with the mistake in their chain of reasoning. Partially because it sets them off balance, and they have to rethink their argument. And the more they start thinking about their argument, the more they're going to start realizing their argument is very weak, especially if it is a really weak argument. So what we're trying to do, remember we talked about this before in the process of apologetics, is exposing the flaws in their thinking. A lot of this is going to come back to logic, logical fallacies, and worldview. Okay? So, another real popular one is an appeal to authority. Appeal to authority. Anyone have an idea or an example of what a faulty appeal to authority might be?
It could be any science journal that is based on like a theory, not even a law.
Okay. If I have a scientific study, and I cite it, I'm showing it to you. This study shows.
Yeah, but if it's not a good study, then
Well, remember, we're talking about faulty appeals to authority. If I have the authority with me, then that's not a faulty appeal. Like if I need a question on math and I lean on Abel, that is not a faulty appeal to authority. If Abel has a question about math and he leans on me, that is a faulty appeal to authority. Okay, because it's not there. Now, an easy way to deal with that is this: studies show. Studies show that. Time out. What study? Well, you know. No, actually, I don't. studies. What study? The study from 1850? The most recent study? Can you cite these? Have you actually read them, or did you hear it on a news show, and you're just repeating back whatever you are hearing? One of the things when I started in the creation ministry that I put no thought into, that Samantha actually helped me with, was when I would do the slides for presentation. Okay, I never bothered putting the sources down because I knew where the source was. I didn't care. The problem was I was not realizing that I am bringing forth a faulty appeal to authority while I'm talking about faulty appeals to authority. Okay? So an easy way to stop someone who's going to throw, well, statistics show, okay, hold on, 90% of statistics are made up on the spot, including this one. Right? So that's a faulty appeal to authority. So if someone does not have those sources right in front of them, then they're not allowed to use that argument. And they'll say, that's not fair. Tough. Straw man argument. Replacing an issue with a crazy issue. Okay? Replacing something that can actually be talked about and discussed with something that really can't be talked about or discussed, or that is so far out in left field that it doesn't really matter. I'll give you an example. I'm going to use the abortion argument. Okay? Planned Parenthood needs all the money they can get because they do parental counseling for new parents. Okay, does that sound like a good argument?
No.
Okay, to them that's a good argument. The problem is they do provide that service. It's like 0.1% of their overall service, and is not impacted by any government funds that they actually get. When people say Planned Parenthood provides breast examinations for women, Planned Parenthood has already admitted that they don't. I think there's like 2 or 3 clinics around the entire country that actually have a machine, and most of the people there don't even know how to use it. That is a straw man argument. You're trying to support something with something so far out in left field, it's not even associated with the argument. You're talking about abortion. You're not talking about these peripheral issues. So you have to pull people back to what you are talking about. You know, people love to talk about peripheral issues. Well, there's tons of them. There's absolutely tons of them. Anyone have anything come to mind?
I'm thinking the whole marriage issue.
What's that?
The whole marriage issue must have a ton of them.
Oh gosh, yes, yeah. Everyone should be allowed to get married because, you can't
That's
fight love.
Love is love, but
That's right.
that thing
That's
that
right.
everyone's got on their lawns, that was all.
Okay, so let's follow the chain of reasoning. Actually, I'm going to hang on to that argument. We're going to come back to it in just a second, okay? Circular reasoning. Anyone think of an example of circular reasoning?
What does that say? I can't read it.
Rocks are old, soil is old. It's just a note for me.
Oh, okay.
First time I ran into circular reasoning was in my 7th grade science textbook, and it's when I stopped believing in the theory of evolution. I was not a Christian when I stopped believing in evolution. I began to question the scientific paradigm because my teacher told me that we could tell these fossils are billions of years old because of the rock layers that they were found in. Look, it's right in your textbook. Oh, wow, that's really amazing. Well, like 2 pages over, it's like you can tell how old these soil layers are based on the fossils that are found in them. Like, wait, what? So I can date the rocks by the soil, but we date the soil by the fossils by the soil. We don't the soil by the fossils. That's circular reasoning. Okay, you actually can't get to a conclusion because there's nothing to base it off of. Well, it's ridiculous. You see this quite often. Christian, God is evil because if God is all-knowing, then he knew there was going to be evil in the world. So therefore, God has to be evil. That ranks right up there with, I work hard. I do cocaine, so I can work longer hours, so I can make more money, so I can do more cocaine, so I can work harder, so I can make more money, so I can. You understand what I'm talking about? It's a really old commercial, but it works, right? Yeah, there's no wrong answer because there's actually no question. You're just relying on 2 things that cannot be supported to prove one another. It's idiotic. But atheists love to lean on that. So in a lot of logical fallacy situations, which you're going to run into quite often, the more you get into conversations with people about your faith, you're going to find these constantly, okay? One of the best tools that you can, one of the best methods that you can develop within yourself is called reductio ad absurdum, to reduce to absurdity, okay? Another way of looking at it is finish connecting the dots. So if someone wants to lean on a method of thinking, great. Take that thinking to its logical conclusion. To its logical conclusion. So you finish connecting the dots. So let's go back to Christy's conversation about marriage. All you need is love, right? So if two people who can make good decisions for themselves, the government has decided that this person is now old enough to make their own decisions. If two people agree that they want to get married, then they should be allowed to get married. Follow the chain of reasoning on that and tell me where the problem is.
They should be able to do whatever they want.
Mm-hmm.
Because the Bible says that a marriage can only be between a man and a woman.
The Bible says that, but the government says any two individuals.
It goes back to what you said before. People voted for rape and said it was okay. You can rape women now, then that's bad, and that's the same thing they voted that is because the government says it doesn't mean it's right.
Exactly. But there's another part to this too. If you're going to grab someone's argument and you're going to push it to absurdity, before you start, make someone clarify the terms that they're using. I tried to do this a little bit. Whenever two individuals have declared their love for one another, they should be allowed to get married.
How old's the individual?
How old do they need to be? That's the problem. That's the problem. Pedophiles had jumped all over this law because now it has opened the door for them. Well, look, the government says that 6-year-old girl is allowed to go have that sixth grader is allowed to go have an abortion without her parents' consent. She is allowed to make her own decisions. Therefore, if you're allowing her to make decisions about life and death for a child, then you should allow her to make the decisions of who she wants to marry. And we decided we want to get married. By the way, I'm 60. These are arguments that are actually happening in our country today. Because any two individuals who want to get married. You see, the standards have changed. Okay? Why have the standards changed? Because there is no absolute morality in the government's eyes. Society has decided that this is now okay. And the church has to decide how much they want to go to war for this. And most of the church honestly just caved almost immediately, which is sad. But that's the idea. So when you take an argument and you can see some of the logical issues going on there, the chain of their thinking is flawed. Make them get specific. What do you mean by people? What do you mean by individuals? Is an infant too young? I mean, where's the cutoff age? Well, that's just stupid. No, well, it's not stupid. I'm asking you to help me understand your argument. You see, I'm not arguing. I'm asking them to explain to me all of the details associated with their chain of reasoning. And what you're going to find very quickly is that 90% of the people you deal with, another fake statistic, have never done it. They've never done it. And what you want to do is help them understand that they really haven't put a lot of thought into this. They really haven't given this the correct amount of thinking. Because if this is going to be okay, then it all has to be okay. How about this one? Christian schools Christian clubs being banned, and Christians being censored on certain campuses. Yet Islam being taught in public schools. Well, I think that's great, because overseas we've been at war with these people for a long time, and it's about time that our kids learned really what's going on in their minds. That sounds like a logical argument. Because if we understand them, maybe they will understand us.
Hell, we don't even understand us.
Yeah. But maybe maybe your kids won't be so prejudiced against something that they don't understand, because they'll understand. So I don't see the point of putting prayer rugs down in the gymnasium and making all the kids come down 2 times during the school year, during the school day, so that they can pray and learn about the 5 pillars of Islam. I don't see the problem.
Okay, we can even say a prayer in school ourselves. I mean, as Americans, I don't want to come across prejudice, but
Yeah.
you know what I'm
This
saying?
is the challenge for us, because when we hit something like that, we're like,
Yeah.
this
yeah.
Merc.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Hashtag, you forgot the
Yeah.
hashtag.
Yeah. Really. Yeah. So we naturally want to start doing what? Defending our position. No. Stop the bus. Make them clarify theirs.
So if you're going to learn
Ask
about
them
Islam,
questions,
why don't you learn about what
Yeah.
other religions on the planet
Mhm.
are being practiced?
Yeah. So, is Christianity allowed to have as much of a presence in the school? Well, no, because Christianity is oppressive. Whoa, okay, hang on a second. Is Hinduism allowed? Do they have a presence? They're being taught the Hindu belief. Well, no. Buddha? No. I don't know. Juju, whatever. Whatever people want to talk. Well, no. Yeah. So the only government-funded religion being taught in our public schools right now is a religion that has declared that we all need to die or join them. Well, you're missing the point. Well, no, I'm not missing the point. I'm just asking, if you're going to teach religion, shouldn't you teach all of them? Well, we could never teach all of them. Okay, should we teach any of them? Well, how are these kids ever going to learn? It's called history class. It's called sociology. They can study it on their own. Their parents can teach them. Is it the school's responsibility to force a religious view on these kids? Because you've already said the school cannot force Christianity on these kids, but what you are saying is you can force Islam on these kids, and you're going to grade them on their ability to understand and practice it. So you're being very hypocritical in your own view by censoring one group but endorsing another. Have you really thought this through? See, I'm not arguing. I'm simply asking them to clarify this point. I am bringing their thinking to absurdity, because this is where they're going. You see what I mean? So, as we're talking, our natural tendency is going to be to defend our faith. Stop, take a breath, make them clarify their position. Within that process, you'll have the ability to stand up to different things. But don't start out with the hair on the back of your neck all up, You know.
You do this before you answer.
Yeah, really. That's a very good question. I don't have a whole lot of that problem. I'm guessing you don't either. Hair's already standing up because it's thick. Yeah. I tell people, say, oh, it's too bad you lost your hair. This was my idea. I did it before this happened. That way I can claim success in that whole process. Okay, so what time do we got? It is 7:51. So what we're going to do is we're going to come back. We're going to start going through chapter 3. I'm going to read the whole thing, and then just to give you a couple minutes to kind of put some things together. And then we're going to go back through line by line, and this is what we're going to do. You guys are going to stop me when you want to make a hermeneutical or an exegetical view or a statement or just bring something to light. If you hear something that you don't like from an atheist standpoint, you don't like what it's inferring or what you believe it might be forcing on you, okay, stop, and then you make your objection, and then you guys have the option to defend.